We've got a lot of folks back in the back. We have, of course, the coroner of Beaufort County. We have Donna, the director of Beaufort County EMS, sheriff of Jasper County, chief of police in Hardyville, chief of police in Bluffton, and I'm sure I'm gonna miss someone, the chief out at the University of South Carolina. And then we have these folks behind us. We have Tom Davis, we have Jim FITZGERALD, Sheldon Epstein, John Pontillo, and Shannon Erickson. Weston Newton and Bill Herb-Kirschman, I spoke to them this morning. They wish they could be with us, but they did a lot of hard work on what we're going to talk about today. Just to give you a little background, about 4 years ago, and I know Jim will correct me if I'm wrong, but about 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Jim, Sheldon, and John, who were representing the Low Country Retired Law Enforcement Officers Association for Beaufort and Jasper County. We met at my father's favorite restaurant, the Cracker Barrel, near Sun City. Jim and Sheldon and John came to me and asked what the Low Country Retired Law Enforcement Officers Association could do to help law enforcement officers in South Carolina. This is not just a Beaufort County thing that Tom will talk about, but this is a South Carolina bill that went through the House and the Senate to support death benefits for first responders killed in the line of duty. Now, I can tell you that when we first talked about this at the Cracker Barrel that morning, we were looking at what we knew was working like tunnels to towers, the 200 Club of the Low Country, or Coastal Empire. And we were looking at law enforcement officers because these guys are retired law enforcement, and of course I'm in law enforcement. So when this conversation made it to the South Carolina House and Senate, it expanded, which rightfully so, it should have, and it did. And that expanded to all first responders. And just to give you an idea on what that is, it's law enforcement officers, professional and volunteer firefighters, emergency medical technicians, which is also called EMS, correctional officers, reserve with part-time police powers, constables enforcing criminal laws, and of course, and most importantly, and rightfully so, those that volunteer in those roles. And this also includes the coroner's offices in South Carolina. So, came together. I know that Jim, I gotta give Jim and Sheldon a lot of credit, John as well, but they met with Tom Davis, our senator here in Beaufort County, several times over a long period of time. I told them at the breakfast that morning that where I was encouraged that they had the forward thinking to look at an opportunity to really help our first responders that are killed in the line of duty, that this was going to be a task. These things don't happen quickly, in our General Assembly. It takes time. And even though there was some discouragement at first with patience, because law enforcement officers, we do not have patience. We like to think that we can get things done quickly, and that's not always the case. But at the end of the day, as Tom Davis will always say, at the end of the day, he got this football across the finish line, and we scored a touchdown. But I've got to look at and honestly say that Tom, Weston, Bill, Shannon, and the entire Beaufort County delegation supported this. And Tom, I don't want to speak out of turn, and I know you'll correct me, but I think that the vote on this, death benefits for first responders, was unanimous within the House and the Senate, and that is absolutely amazing. In these political times, knowing that that all of our House and Senate members supported first responders and the work that they do every day, we're very, very pleased, and we're extremely happy that this was done, and hope we never use it. There's a benefit there for families, hopefully we can go about our years and never have a law enforcement officer or first responder killed in the line of duty. We know that's not reality, but that is our hope.
The Low Country Law Enforcement Officers Association is an agency of 130 members now, of people that really care about the police officers that follow them. As one of the noted psychiatrists said, that law enforcement today seems to be almost like a police officer has to be an umpire who umpires a game of semi-domesticated human beings trying to live peaceably with one another in a complicated world. It certainly is a complicated world today when we talk about policing. It's also just as much danger for the other first responders, and that's why we felt that it was very important to try to get these benefits into South Carolina. I have to commend and thank the sheriff for his support right from the beginning, from that breakfast at the restaurant, to Senator Davis, who supported us from the beginning to the end, even through some times when we thought that we weren't going to make it, that it was going to die. But it didn't. It worked, and thank you very much for that support.
Jim, tell these people who you are. Where are you from?
Well, I'm Jim FITZGERALD. I'm a retired colonel from the State Police in New York. 37 years of doing that, and then the last 20 years of doing Beaufort County. And Beaufort County is very nice. New York has got its problems. You talk about confusing issues and a tough atmosphere up there. It's glad to be here, and I'm proud to be here, and I'm very happy to be able to assist where I can. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. You talk about a professional agency. Look at this agency. It's nice to see that coming down from an agency of 4,000 people to Beaufort County and seeing such a heightened degree of professionalism with the policing in this area. So, thank you very much.
John?
No.
You? Sheldon?
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shannon Erickson. I retired from the Pennsylvania State Police in 2011, at which time I held the rank of captain, and I moved to the Low Country in 2013. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to join you all here today to recognize a historic event for the state of South Carolina, for the first responders in the state of South Carolina. Colonel FITZGERALD, as he mentioned, and I are members of the Low Country Retired Law Enforcement Officers Association. Colonel FITZGERALD was the past president, I was the past vice president, and the Low Country Law Enforcement Officers are based in Bluffton. They're a non-profit fraternal organization with members who lived all over the United States, but who have settled in the Low Country. And they're people from local, county, state, and federal law enforcement agencies who've held a variety of law enforcement assignments throughout their careers. We began several years ago to discuss the issue of state death benefits one evening, and I'd done a little bit of research on this from the Concerns of Police Survivors website. I had found at that time South Carolina was among the 16 states and the District of Columbia which did not have a state death benefit for law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. And we continued this discussion with Colonel FITZGERALD. We put together an informational package that we brought to Senator Davis, proposed to him, and he immediately embraced this issue and said that he intended to propose legislation to correct this situation, and he did, and it has now become a reality. After that, we also met with Sheriff Tanner, who is a long-standing member of our organization, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in Beaufort County, and he also immediately supported this effort. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to be here with you all today to see that now we have a state death benefit for first responders in the state of South Carolina. Thank you.
I mean, look at the diversity in law enforcement in Beaufort County. I've known these guys for a long time. We've always looked at the Low Country Retired Law Enforcement Association as an opportunity to recruit. And we recruited y'all many, many years ago for our cold case committee, and a lot of cold cases in Beaufort County have been resolved, not only because of the efforts of law enforcement, but also from our Retired Law Enforcement Officers Association. They bring a lot to the table with their experience, their life experience, and they bring a lot of experience from other areas of the country here to the Low Country for us to look at cold cases, and we really appreciate it. If there is a godfathers of this benefits bill being passed in the House and the Senate, it starts right here with these three guys. Because they brought it to the table, and these other folks behind me took it to the finish line. So we really appreciate you doing this for law enforcement and first responders in South Carolina. Before I get to bring Tom and Shannon up, and I'll let them tag team because one's in the Senate and one's in the House. 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, in a conversation I was having with Representative Bill Herb-Kirschman, we were in dire need of additional funding for our forensic services lab, which folks, in 2004, we created our drug lab in Beaufort County. In 2010, we brought DNA into our forensics lab. There's so much more that we're doing. Of course, we're doing latent prints, and we're doing all the things that traditional law enforcement requires us to do, but we're advancing everything that we possibly can in the form of science and in technology. Because we know that that's the future for us being better at what we do and protecting our citizens in Beaufort County. So over the years, I've had the opportunity to engage not only with Bill, but with Weston and Shannon and Tom and Jeff from Hilton Head. But we were able to get additional funding. This year we received $500,000 from the state of South Carolina to help further our forensic and forensics lab, which is of course science and technology. So this is just one item, and they're going to talk about the death benefits for first responders. But these guys are in it to win it. I mean, Beaufort County is their home. They represent the citizens of this county. They do an awesome job. We are very, very blessed to have a delegation of people that really care about the community. We're blessed to have Shannon and Tom here today because they represent Beaufort County. Tom is, he's got a lot of history in politics. He was Governor Sanford's chief of staff for a good while, so he knows how to kind of maneuver through the House and the Senate. And Shannon's got her way of maneuvering too. Hers is more of elbow, get out of the way, we're gonna get this done, a type attitude. And you know what? Whatever works, works. Okay, I'm all about it. So I want to bring, and I'll give the podium to both Shannon and Tom and let them run with it. Thank y'all both.
Team Beaufort is pretty strong, Sheriff, and it's because of the citizens, that, like you've just heard. The best things that we do come from the citizens of the Low Country. And our delegation is Senator Tom Davis, Senator Chip Campson, Senator Margie Bright Matthews. In the House, you've got Representative Bill Herb-Kirschman, Representative Jeff Bradley, Representative Weston Newton, myself, and Representative Michael Rivers, and our newest member, Representative Bill Hager. We get things done, and we're really proud of the work that we do as a collaborative group. We've done voting rights bill and changed the voting to be more accessible and fair. That passed unanimously, but it was spearheaded in Beaufort County. The cancer benefits for our firefighters was spearheaded out of Beaufort County and passed unanimously. And now we've got this piece that I agree we never want to use. But to include all of those who put their lives on the line every day. And let us be clear, these men and women do not know quite often what they're walking into. So many of them volunteer their time and their efforts, and they do the very best they can for all of us involved. The very least we can do is make sure that they know we care on the front end. Backing all of those folks is a vital part of government service, and it's an honor to have been able to work on the House side of this. There were both bills going through, House bill and a Senate bill, because we were going to take no chances. We knew that we wanted this done, and we were going to use whatever avenue. And if I elbowed a few people along the way, so be it. I think that's what we ask our folks to do. So Senator Davis really spearheaded the end of the game and took it across the finish line. The House has been unanimous on this issue, which I can tell you it speaks volumes for the merit and the love of the people who serve us in these capacities. So on behalf of our delegation and the House and the Senate collectively, we'd just like to say thank you and make sure that everyone knows that this effort is to say we love you, we appreciate you, and we want you to know how much you mean to us from the beginning to the end of your careers. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Tom Davis. I'm the state senator for District 46, Beaufort and Jasper counties. And I guess I want to make 3 points. The first has already been made. Actually, they've all been made, but I want to reiterate them. This started at the grassroots level. This started with Jim FITZGERALD and with Sheldon Erickson and their organization, getting with PJ getting with me getting with Shannon and the rest of the delegation. I mean, that's how the process got started. It was purely a grassroots movement from people who were retired law enforcement who pointed out, to my embarrassment, that South Carolina was one of 16 states that did not have death benefits for those killed in the line of duty. So that's the first thing I would mention. The second thing is, and this can't be overemphasized, just because something is a good idea doesn't mean it gets done in Columbia. You've got several hundred bills in any given year that are trying to make their way through a very narrow funnel. And this particular bill is no exception to that, especially when you're talking about a bill that's got an impact on the general fund or an impact on the insurance fund. Once money's involved, you get people's attention. But the reason we were able to get this done, and I want to emphasize this, while it was originated locally with Jim and Sheldon and their group and with PJ advocating it, it was a Beaufort County delegation bill. Make no mistake about this. It was me and Chip and Shannon and Margie and Jeff and Weston and Bill and Michael and all the others and Mr. Haggerty. I mean, all those fellows and gals pitched in on this. And the reason Beaufort County was able to drive this thing to the finish line, and this deserves emphasis, Beaufort County delegation has more committee chairmanships than any other county in this state. Chip Campson is chairman of the Senate Fish, Game, and Forestry Committee. I'm chairman of the Senate Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee. Shannon Erickson is chairman of the Education Committee. Weston Newton is chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Bill Herb-Kurzman is vice chairman of Ways and Means. Jeff Bradley is chairman of the Regulatory Committee. I mean, it's twice as many chairmanships as any other county. And so when things are important to our constituents, like what Jim and Sheldon and PJ brought to our attention, or last year when we need to make our election laws a little bit more transparent and some more accountability and more integrity to it, it was Beaufort County delegation that drove it through. And so I want to start with those 2 process questions. One, this started with the grassroots and with constituents and with local law enforcement. Secondly, it got pushed through to the finish line because of the seniority and the chairmanships that our delegation has. And then lastly, I'll say this. The laws a state passes says something about itself. It says something about what they value. It says something about where public resources ought to go. And in a civilized society, we can't have a functioning commerce. We can't have people enjoying a quality of life if you don't have people like law enforcement and firefighters and corrections officers putting themselves in the line of fire and in harm's way every single day. You can't have a functioning society without that special breed of man and woman who is willing to put their lives at risk for the benefit of society as a whole. And there is a reciprocal obligation on us as legislators and collectively representing our constituents to acknowledge what they bring to the table, to acknowledge the role they play in society, to acknowledge that they put their lives at risk. And so I'm proud that South Carolina can say we're no longer one of the 16 states that don't have this death benefit for first responders. I'm also proud that we expanded it beyond law enforcement to include firefighters and corrections and coroners and others who are deputized to enforce our criminal laws. I think it's broader than most other states. And so I am proud that at a time when law enforcement gets called into question a lot in our society, and movements like defund the police tend to have hashtag trending, I like to have the opposite as the effect. In South Carolina, the South Carolina General Assembly, unanimously, 170 members of the General Assembly voted for this bill, acknowledging what law enforcement and first responders, the critical role they play in our society, and I'm really proud we're able to get this across the finish line. Thank you very much.
Questions, just go ahead and let us know who the question is for, and then someone will step up to the mic.
Actually, Sheriff, if I could with you first of all.
Okay.
One of the questions that I have is how extensive is the coverage? I know that with the 200 Club in Savannah, one of the things that they sort of emphasize is following the children through, especially the younger children that need to go to school, college, that sort of thing. How extensive is it, and how long are the families going to be able to access some of the benefits?
Tom?
Yeah, the benefits themselves, they're a one-time death benefit. If you're killed in the line of duty, it's $75,000. If you're killed in the line of duty with extenuating circumstances, like you were in fresh pursuit or hot pursuit or responding to an emergency situation, it becomes double to $150,000, and that's a one-time death benefit. The way the bill was initially drafted, it got paid for out of the Public Employee Benefit Administration Fund, because we talked about law enforcement that were hired by the state, they were employees, and so we had the cost of those death benefits amortized or allocated among all the participants in PEBA. When it came to the Senate floor, it got expanded to include volunteers, okay, law enforcement, those who are deputized, constables, and others to enforce our criminal laws. And also got expanded to include other categories of first responders. And so once we started to do that, it gets a little bit more complicated because, it's a great idea, but then when others get on board and it has more of a fiscal cost, you then have to go to the finance chairman, the Ways and Means chairman, the director of PEBA, and explain how it's not going to blow a hole in their budgets. And so it was a little more complicated, but the process worked the way it was supposed to. And I want to give credit to Shannon and my colleagues over in the House, and that they came up, quite frankly, with a better way to fund the volunteer piece of this than I had come up with over in the Senate. They quite rightly noted that public employees ought to be paid for out of PEBA, but if you're volunteers, that ought to come from the general fund. That ought to be something that all South Carolinians, contribute toward. And so the House amended the bill to include that funding mechanism for volunteers, and I think that is a very equitable way of doing it. It's a great example of how the House and the Senate came together, reconciled the best versions of both those bills, and sent the best version down to Henry McMaster for his signature.
Any idea as to when these benefits will actually go into effect?
They're in effect now. In effect, actually, when we went back up in June to adopt the conference report, because we're reconciling the House and the Senate versions of the bill, it had an effective date of upon execution by the governor. But 3 weeks earlier, in mid-May, a firefighter had died in Irma. And so by unanimous consent on the floor of the Senate and on the floor of the House, we agreed to make it retroactive. I believe it was to May 21st, or whatever that day was when he died, so that family would enjoy those benefits. Because had we not got bogged down with the reconciliation process and having to go back up and vote on it again, this law would have been in effect and it would have covered that family. And we felt like that was the equitable thing to do. And it's very rare that something gets unanimous consent approval like that. But this particular notion, the idea that this family ought to be included, it did get unanimous approval. So it's in effect now, and will be in effect in perpetuity.
What kind of impact are you hoping this will have on the grand scheme? I know recruitment has been an issue for many departments across the state. Do you think this could be like an incentive?
I think it's not a silver bullet, no pun intended there, I shouldn't say that. It's not a panacea, okay? Along with many other things, we can start with better recruitment. We need to increase pay across the board. We need to increase the money we allocate to the police academy. We need to go ahead and provide, certain benefits for law enforcement and first responders, this being one of them. So again, these are individuals that put themselves on the line every day. We can't have a functioning society without them. We're starting to prioritize in our budget those things, okay? This is an example of how we're prioritizing first responders and law enforcement. But we also, in recent years, have really worked on increasing the salaries of teachers in our classrooms. And I know Shannon can talk a little bit about that because she's been spearheading that as well. So we're doing a good job, I believe, up in the General Assembly of identifying those individuals that bring unique value to society, and then having state dollars, which is how a state expresses what's important to it, put behind that. So I'm very proud of those initiatives. Shannon, if you want to share a little bit about teachers, I've been working hard on that.
Teachers are part of the equation, and we, for the past 6 years, increased teacher salary raises in lots of different ways across our budget. But Tom, I've got to echo what you said. The society sets its priorities, and South Carolina spoke loud and clear. They want these folks taken care of. They want teachers revered as professionals. They want to make sure our law enforcement is not operating on a shoestring budget. They'd like to see them with the folks they need to do the job and keep the community safe, but also the equipment like their body cameras that we've funded in the past. This past year, one that kind of meshes the two is that we set up an actual school safety center through SLED and acquired a training facility so that all of the school districts and all of our teachers can work hand in hand with law enforcement and go train in a facility so that everybody feels prepared and ready and uniformly, same curriculum, to go out to our different districts and be able to handle any of those situations. Because, you know, forearmed and forewarned is a whole lot better than coming in without an idea of what to do. So we've been trying to place dollars and time with the people that matter most to the citizens of South Carolina. And this benefit speaks directly to that. Again, I hope it's never used, but yes, what Senator Davis noted when we brought, and I believe Representative Newton brought the amendment to the floor, and it needed a unanimous vote. And it's not very often that happens at the 11th hour, and it deals with a lot of money. But that family had missed out on something that we didn't feel was right and just. And when the body of 170 people agree on something like that, we should take note and make sure that everyone knows South Carolina stood up for what was right and just. And we'll keep working on all those folks that are providing services that make our communities better and brighter and increase the quality of life for us all.
Yeah, and let me say this, I've been in this business a long time. I've had the opportunity to be the sheriff of this county for over 25 years. When we look at our delegation and we look at the talent that we have in Beaufort County and the low country of South Carolina, we can go back years and find that the low country of South Carolina has been the tail wagging a dog for a long time for the state. You know, and we're beyond that. The talent that we have in our delegation, the talent that we have and the experience that we have in our retired law enforcement officers that look at Beaufort County as a retirement home. We've got a lot of retired law enforcement and public education teachers in this county, and we're very, very appreciative of who we attract. We attract a lot of good people to Beaufort County and the low state of South Carolina. You know, it's always been a struggle from time to time, and you brought up the question of recruitment and retention, and you know, this is, unfortunately, this is one of the downsides of being in public service as a first responder, where we have to look at death benefits to maybe encourage someone to look at first responder jobs as a job that's good for them and their family. And these death benefits are very, very important. There are a lot of things that the South Carolina Department of Administration has done over the past couple of years. I've talked about it for the past 2 years. I know that Governor McMaster was concerned, who is a genuine supporter of law enforcement and first responders. He was concerned that the competition within South Carolina was not as good as it could be when it comes to attracting and recruiting not only law enforcement but first responders. He had the Department of Administration 2 years in a row now go and do a salary study, compensation study, to find out what was fair and what we have in compensation here in South Carolina. You need to figure out how to work it.
Yeah, I do.
But, and we used that Department of Administration study. I thought they did very good study, but the study was for South Carolina law enforcement, not Beaufort County law enforcement, not Allendale law enforcement, not other areas in the state like Charleston and Greenville and Spartanburg and those areas. Folks, there's always things that we can look at to make this profession more attractive to any part of our generation. If it's someone that just turned 21 years of age, or me giving Jim Fitzgerald a job and training him on cell phone use. I mean, there are always things that we can do to make this job more attractive. And I think salary is one of them. Equipment and training is the other. Death benefits, of course, being one of them, but also health benefits upon retirement. I mean, there are a lot of men and women in this job that go through their 25-year career starting at 21 years of age. They do their 25, 26, 27, 28, 30 years, and they're retiring at a fairly young age, in their early 50s. Social Security doesn't kick in, and all those other benefits, and Medicare doesn't kick in until age 65. But during their time in service, if they put 30 years in the system, the amount of injuries that they have had during that time is forever. It's not just, I'm going to the hospital, I'll get out in a couple of days and I'll feel better. I know my back's shot, but I'll do the best I can. Elbows, knees, PTSD, all the other stuff that these folks go through. So we are fortunate in Beaufort County to have a county council that has supported our budgets every year, knowing that we'll do better tomorrow than we did today, and we did better today than we did yesterday. There's still a lot that we can do. I know the state of South Carolina has the opportunity to provide medical benefits to retirees if you invest 5 years into the system as a state employee. But we've got to work, and I know it's a struggle for smaller counties that have a tough time with budgets, but there are things that counties can do to support their first responders, and medical benefits is another one of those things on top of salary that we can recruit and encourage people to stay in the job longer. But if the health benefits are there to help you from retirement to Medicare, then of course those things are there. We are always working to make this profession better. The better we are at what we do, the safer our communities are. I really appreciate the Godfathers for coming out and being a part of this. And I really appreciate Tom and Shannon and the delegation for carrying us across the goal line. This is an absolute touchdown for the state. I also want to bring this up. And I talked about the tail wagging the dog earlier. This is an example of what the low country of South Carolina does for the state of South Carolina, okay? But we also were able to accomplish this year the Class 3 Advanced School Resource Officer Program. That program was developed at the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office. And we got it passed through the Training Council. It's supported by the South Carolina Training Council and the Academy. And we kicked off the first program with Bluffton and Beaufort, Port Royal and Beaufort County. We kicked off that first program, and actually our officers that are going into our schools that are Class 3 advanced law enforcement officers from Bluffton, Beaufort, and Beaufort County, they are in training right now and should be assigned to a school sometime in late August. So again, there's another program for the state of South Carolina, not just Beaufort County, but South Carolina, that's going to benefit safety in our schools. It's going to make our teachers safer, our students and our families feel better about their child going to a school. And that's public, private schools throughout this county. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well.